Today we will be looking at specifically the different kinds of constituent elements of AI. So when we say AI, we talk about basic capability for displaying intelligent behavior. But then, what are the different constituent elements of intelligent behavior? So let us list one by one. We'll explore each of them in reasonable detail over a period of time. So let's look at one of the most important elements, which is what we call as knowledge representation. So knowledge representation is basically a facet of AI where the inherent experience or the explicit codification of the experience happens in form of a specific knowledge which is internally represented in an AI system. This could be represented in various types of forms. We have historically developed several variants of knowledge representations over history of AI. We, in fact, if you see the history, we have, you can say, thousands of varieties of knowledge representations for different AI systems. I'll give you some simple examples. For example, one of the very common, popular AI programs in the 80s and early 90s was expert systems, where the knowledge representation was typically in the form of what is known as logical rules. And when we say logical rules, basically more like if there's else. So for example, we had a collection of facts, and if there are rules, and if this happens and this happens, then assume that this has happened like this. So knowledge representation is that in form of a logical set of rules. In modern terms, we can have a machine learning program having internal knowledge representation in form of something like an equation, like say y equal to m1x1 plus m2x2 plus m3x3 plus intercept, which is c, which is probably like a linear regression. Or it can have a more complex representation like a neural network, which is a multi-layer collection of neurons, where each neuron in turn is a multi-input, multi-output node, and a collection of all of these nodes connected via a network, which is basically forms what is known as a neural network. So if you see, all these varieties of neural networks are primarily the foundation of the modern concepts of deep learning. So deep learning, if you see, is primarily based on this notion of neural network as underlying knowledge representation. So while knowledge representation is definitely an important aspect, the other aspect is what do you do with the knowledge that is represented and modeled, etc. The next aspect which is important is what is known as reasoning. When we say reasoning is basically a basic human tenet whereby in presence of existing knowledge you infer a new piece of knowledge. This can be happening either in form of when you have a lot of raw data and try to infer some generic rules or patterns, or suppose you have some universal laws and you expect that to be applied in a specific scenario, then you apply that rule in that context and you apply that to get a new form of knowledge. So reasoning is another facet of human intelligence, which is where you try to create new knowledge from existing knowledge. You may be using any of the knowledge representation. Then the other aspect which we have already covered briefly in the overview of AI is that if you see, any AI program is ultimately a search through a possible set of infinite number of possible solutions for any question or any kind of solution. So in that sense, you have a very interesting proposition. We call AI as an inexact science. Inexact science means we don't want to create a perfect or an exact equation to satisfy a particular input and how to explain the output in terms of inputs, but you explain the majority of the phenomena in terms of a potential knowledge representation or a model, but you don't want to call it a science. So that's where AI becomes more like a exploration and a science of search through possible myriad alternatives. Next comes, if you see from a search, a corresponding approach is what is known as optimization. When you say optimization is important from a perspective of search in the sense that when you want to come up with the final solution for your target business problem, you have to look at what is the candidate solution which you are going to output as a corresponding solution for AI program to be deployed, and that is where you have to search the best possible solution among many possible solutions which you obtain through search. So optimization becomes a key tenet of AI. That's why we have optimization techniques in AI like planning and constraint programming, etc., which help in modeling and optimizing objective functions in terms of the stated goal. The other aspect beyond all of this is what we call as a core tenet of intelligence, which is basically embodies multiple concepts, which is called machine learning.